Welcome to Confessions Beyond the Food. I'm your host, Nancy Redland. Let's dig in and get inspired. So welcome back to Confessions Beyond the Food. My name is Nancy. I'm with W3 Sales, and I am joined today by the infamous John Franke. The infamous one. So John is a culinary strategist and consultant that is based here in DFW. He works with new and existing brands, helping with brand development, menu development. Our last episode, we got to talk to John and hear about his story and what got him here today. And it was really cool. And I really encourage you guys to go check that out if you haven't already. But today we're going to kind of focus on, what he's doing now. And one thing you talked about that really struck me in the last one was kind of like your new identity. And so, and we kind of got up to 2020 and then we got a cliffhanger and then you just let us go. So, but anywho, so I want to pick up there and kind of talk about what you're doing now and yeah.
All right. And this is like 2 weeks later. I'm sorry I'm wearing the same shirt.
So. You need to buy some new clothes. Guys, he needs you to hire him, okay?
Oh, yeah.
So,
times are tough. So
yeah, times are tough.
Scrapping with this one shirt. But anyway, so where we left off last time is I had sort of jumped out of front burner restaurants and started consulting. I remember exactly at what point during that time we jumped out, but basically what that was, and I've had people come to me and go, I want to do consulting, like, how should I start? And I always say, have a plan, right? So when I stepped away, I didn't have a plan. I thought the plan was going to be just, take a few months off, kind of let things sort of come to me as they will. I don't know what to do, with this whole thing. But what was good is I had a couple consultants that I had known, I had used. And so I said, well, what should happen? What should I do? Generally, what anybody gave me as advice, whether it was a consultant or someone in the industry, it was more administrative advice. So get insurance, build a website, get a bank account,
business 101,
right? So me saying, what should I do was translated as, what do you need to do to start a business? The advice I didn't get or didn't even seek, because I didn't know that I needed it, was, well, what does consulting mean? Like, what does that mean? What does my day in and day out look like? A day for a normal person working in the industry is you wake up early, and certainly at my level, and checking sales reports and blah, 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 and then visiting with other chefs and restaurants. And what are we working on? What's happening? And then that day ends, at 9 o'clock at night or something. It may extend into the after midnight, depending on the emails and things. So this was like a new foray for me. And one of the reasons that I stepped away, one of the many reasons, the personal reason was to just really hone in on my marriage and my relationship with my kids, because that was something that I watched as my first marriage had fallen apart. And then later got married again and sort of felt like I was making the same mistakes, right? Like putting work first, not focusing in on my kids. Just the other night, my wife and I don't know if we were joking, because I don't know if it's really that funny to her, but like I was saying, oh yeah, like when we had our second kid or first kid, I was on my laptop and I was like, oh, hold on, let me finish this email. You're in labor? Okay, let me.
Are you serious?
It was kind of like that type of atmosphere.
She's got a lot of grace.
Yeah. So, at the moment, I think, and she may not have had as much grace, but right now, of course, we look back on it and go, wow, it's not that it was funny. It's not that it was okay. It was that we're past that.
Yeah.
And so how God has really helped us kind of through this journey. And I say that to say, like, one of the issues that I had starting was I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what consulting looked like. I was blessed enough to have business coming my way. I think because of the people that I knew that I reached out to, it certainly helped having a website, which helped drive people sort of, if they were looking for consulting, that didn't know me. But most of my work in the first probably year was just from people, like word of mouth. And so that was a great opportunity. So I was working Like I was saying that I was like semi-retired, but I was still like leaving the house at 9, or I was working in my office, all the time. And it would be like, I know it's dinner, but hold on, let me finish this. And my whole vision was I'm going to reprioritize things. Everything's going to be better, and I'm going to be, available, and I'm going to be at everybody's sports events. And it just was like my brain was saying one thing, my heart was saying another thing, my hands were saying another thing, and I don't think in the moment I realized what was happening. I don't think I realized the juxtaposition or the dilemma. And like we talked about in the last episode, like, COVID kind of like was like a light bulb moment to go, okay, I don't have any work at this point. So now what? Now I'm confronted with, hey, my wife's still here, but this didn't shape up the way we thought it would the last 9 months, the last, previous 7 years or whatever we had been married at that point, that didn't shape up the way we envisioned. My kids were around. Now they're not even in school. So now they're really around. And I couldn't escape anything. I couldn't run off to work. I couldn't, run to a client. And so that's kind of really where I started to dig in and understand, okay, hold on. Let me take a pause. Let me listen. Let me breathe. Let me adjust. And was able to go, okay, on a practical, there's a sort of a spiritual level to this and a practical level, but like on a practical business level, it was, I need a plan, and I need structure, and I need boundaries. And so what I need to do is write the contracts to where it boxes me in a good way, to where I don't go, yeah, sure, I'll just do your menu. And then there's like tasting after tasting after tasting, and there's a limited amount of menu items because I didn't put any parameters or boundaries. And so I learned quickly to go, okay, if I'm really going to put my family first, I need to adjust the way that I'm coming about this. I don't need to answer an email the second it comes in. I don't need to return somebody's phone call 15 minutes later. I need to say, what am I doing at the moment and in the moment? And that comes first if it's my family, and then the work kind of will work itself out. And I was always in the mindset of, hey, I email you, I call you, you call me back. This is an emergency. Everything is urgent. Everything needs to be done because there's so much work coming behind us. Like I talked about, we were creating so many brands and doing so many things in so many cities that there wasn't time to wait. Time was of the essence, right?
Yeah.
And so then in consulting, I realized, hey, hold on a second. I was the one that was thinking everything was urgent. It probably wasn't all that urgent. And now it's like, I emailed that guy on Monday and it's Friday and he still hasn't got back to me. It's like, oh yeah, John, like not everybody's put you in the center of their existence. Like I'm just a consultant. Like I'm just the consultant. So when they're ready for me, they'll call me. It's 4 years into this. I still I have to go, oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, I sent the email at 8 a.m. I'm not expecting a response at 8:15. I need to give them like 48 to 72 hours, right? And so it's been interesting for me to do that. So, but what all that being said is where I kind of honed it down and how I really focused in, and this has been evolving over the last 4 years as to how I do things, what kind of clients I come to me. Like I sort of have a niche. I don't turn people down generally. I don't have this thing like, oh, I just turn them down. I don't do that. Generally, what God brings to my plate is the work that works for me and the client that needs what I have to offer. And it's a really good working relationship with the clients. But the two big buckets I work in is one, as you mentioned, sort of in strategy. I'm consider myself like a culinary strategist, resource, a culinary advisor, where I can come into a brand, whether that's one location or multiple locations, and work with either the culinary team, executive chef, a kitchen manager, a VP of ops, a CEO. It all depends on the brand and on the client. But there's what I call a receiver of the information. So I get called to say, hey, our food costs are kind of messed up. Our operations aren't where we want it to be. Our food isn't where we want it to be. Our labor, whatever that might be in that back of the house setting. And I could say, okay, I'll come in, I'll evaluate your business. I will give you what I call solution-minded opportunities, right? It's a fancy way of saying I'm going to find a whole bunch of things that are wrong and I'm going to give you solutions to them.
I'm going to judge you.
So I try not to judge, but I say, hey, look, I've made enough mistakes over the decades that I've done this, that I've probably seen what you're trying to do, in good or bad.
Right.
I've seen some version of this, and I generally have a fairly good solution as to how to avoid that problem happening again. So point is, I evaluate it, and then it could be a week, it could be months of the fixing of these issues, working through those various people on the team. So that's more sort of long term. There is tangible results. They're slower to come, right? Like, you want to change a product or change something from another vendor. Change your plateware. Well, what are you going to do with the old plateware? Right. So you've got to have a plan for how to cycle that out. So changing plateware may take 6 months. Changing some frozen French fry may take a month, because you have to move through what Cisco brought in just for you, or your freezer has 2 weeks worth of something in it. And so there's a process there that takes time. The other thing I do is what you mentioned is new brand menu development. So someone comes and says, hey, I've got a new brand. This is what it is, sort of describes it to me. And I help understand what the DNA is, what this brand is all about. And then I create a menu for them. That process usually involves, let's say we end up with 25 menu items, which includes dessert, lunch, dinner, brunch, appetizers. All that would be only 25 menu items, that's like the magic number for brand development and opening a brand new restaurant. And then you can grow and evolve into more. But I say 25. So I'll give them a menu maybe that has 35 items. So throwing some ideas out there. What I say is I'm throwing darts at a dartboard, but I'm not throwing them haphazardly. I want every single 35 darts to hit the bullseye. And I want you to have a difficult time to understand which ones to take off. I don't just throw out like random ideas. It all has brand specificity to it, and they're all with intention. And so once we do that, we come up with a final menu. Then what I do is I produce all the recipes, the documents, the order guides, where to buy things from, what the plateware should be, what goes on what, who you should buy all that from, when you should get that all in, kind of give them a plan and a strategy. To equate it sort of football terms, I get you sort of to the 5-yard line. And then from there, you hire your kitchen manager or chef or GM or culinary person, whatever that is, and they receive all that information, and then they execute it and they put it into place. So I'm writing all the plans, all the plays, right? And then they've got their own quarterback and receivers. They have to execute it. They're on the field. I'm not the one there cooking it with them. I'm overseeing it as a strategist and an advisor, as someone to say, hey, here's all the information you've been given, and here's how you should execute it. And it works really, really well that way. And so that's that evolution that's taken shape. Where my previous life, before consulting, I thought that I was the only human being in existence that could open a restaurant. That was my impression. I have to be there. I have to be the one calling the shots. I have to be the one dictating everything that's happening. And then, realized quickly that wasn't quite the case with millions of restaurants across the world that open without John Franke. How is that humanly possible?
I don't know.
And so that it wasn't even like a humbling thing. It was like a realization, stop being such an idiot. And so the consulting has done a lot of things on the practical level. It's allowed me to learn how to use the things that I've learned and teach other people and help them not make the same mistakes that I make. And I say all the time to people, it's like, you're not hiring me because all the things I've done right. You're hiring me for all the things I've done wrong. Because I've learned all the things that not to do. Right. Not all of them. I'm constantly learning, but I have come across so many things that I've stumbled or, just anything that I've done that maybe wasn't such a good idea, or I've seen not such a good idea. Now that I'm exposed to so many brands at one time, I can walk into restaurants and go, whoa, that's a bad idea. Or I go, oh my gosh, I never even thought of that. That's great. Put that in the log. And then now 3 clients later, I'll be like, it's a really good idea. And then I look like this expert but I just saw because I'm just exposed to it. Yeah.
You're basically giving them the cliff notes on, and all they have to do is take your notes and execute.
Yeah. I would say I'm giving them the textbook. Even beyond the cliff notes, I'm giving them the whole script, but I'm not the actor, right? I'm not the teacher. I write the textbook for them. they have to interpret the textbook, and they have to teach the textbook,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to make sure everybody buys in, right? So Cliff Notes, yes, I'm going to give them Cliff Notes. I'm also going to give them the full information, and it comes in different ways and packages. So the point is, though, is that's the two main things that I do. Occasionally, I get a call to help, maybe like a board, like
Mm-hmm.
some kind of USDA type board, potatoes and these type of things. It doesn't happen very often, but they need some ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and it might do some of that stuff. Generally, that stuff has not come my way anymore. It's just this sort of what I would consider polished, casual, sort of
Mm-hmm.
non-chef type
Mm-hmm.
menu. So
Mm-hmm.
they can hire a person like me to create the menu, and with the mindset that kitchen managers and lead line cooks and maybe people that aren't as culinary driven in the front of the house as well can all participate and execute this menu at a high level. So I'm not a Michelin star kind of guy. Like, I'm not going to give you that kind of food. I'm going to give you really, really great, innovative, craveable, creative food on really cool, creative, innovative presentations
Mm-hmm.
by plateware from some of the companies you represent. And then from there, you can execute it and have fun with it.
And I can attest to this. He makes very, very yummy, craveable food. And I mean,
I try.
Yeah. So what's your favorite concept that you've done so far?
Probably my whole favorite concept that I really put my heart and soul into would be the Rancho Las Colinas, which is probably 14 or 15 years old. When I got hired into Front Burner at the time, there was really only 3 other people that worked in the company. Randy DeWitt, who was the CEO, Jack Gibbons, who was the COO, who brought me over from Pappas, and then Scott Gordon, our CFO. Scott since retired, and then when Twin Peaks was sold, not everybody kind of scurried, but the changes shift. Like, I stepped away to consulting. I'm actually working with them again on retainers. So I kind of come in as that strategist and kind of advisor, help them through some of their brands, not all of them. But Randy's still around, but Jack has stepped up into the CEO role. But back then, we were all like, green, essentially.
Right.
We'd all been in the industry. We thought we knew what we were doing. But what was really neat is that it was Randy's idea, his vision, take this old Bahama Breeze in Las Colinas and said, look, this really kind of looks like a big barn, like a big farmhouse. There was this sort of Jamaica slanted thing out, sort of interior. It was outside, but it was like a covered, climatized patio, and that felt sort of Caribbean. And you threw up some Texas flags and signs, and all of a sudden it looked like some hoedown, right?
Yeah.
And then inside was a little more upscale. But that's the brand where I was really able, after all these years at Pappas of creating new items for existing brands with other chefs as a collaboration as a team, to really step in and collaborate with only a couple people and create this brand that today is one of the most successful brands that the company has in terms of sales per location. Not like they've only have 3 locations total, where some of them have, Twin Peaks has 100 something, so in terms of size, no, but like the sales and profit margin and those types of things, it's one of the more popular. And at the end of the day, it was the food that I love and embrace, which is just everyday food for the everyday person, done in a kind of a different, innovative way. Not too quirky, not too outside the box, just done really, really well. And it's kind of a mix of a steakhouse and a casual lunch place mixed together. So, you come in with your Platinum American Express and you order a tomahawk ribeye and I order a chicken fried steak, and everybody feels like they're part of the same elevated experience. So there's 2 totally different experiences on the plate.
Yeah, that meatloaf.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't say no to it at any time. So,
and what I love about the brand too is that the kitchen is so big that every brand that was created in Front Burner was created out of that kitchen.
Wow.
So there's a lot of like crossover. We'd be working on something and go, it needs like a vinaigrette that has, it's like, oh, there's one in the cooler, that's already in this brand. And we would bring it out and then jazz it up to make it more specific to the other brand. But there was all this sort of baseline recipes, and so it's kind of a home away from home. It's where I met my wife, my second wife,
Really?
Yeah. She was a bar manager there and I was a corporate chef. And so, nothing nefarious going on, as we didn't necessarily work side by side.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the cooks that were hired on day one are still with the company and they're executive chefs. I think there's 3 of them that are executive chefs out of like maybe, out of maybe 20 that we originally hired. I mean, it's that's really
That's
amazing.
rare.
And so so it's sort of the base, the
Mhm.
center of everything. And my kids remember being in there when they were little, running around. And I remember being in there and the lights would go off and it's dark. It's a place of kind of, you always think about, like, what was the place that gave you calm? Like
Mhm.
that place gave me calm, even though there was really hairy nights, like
Mhm.
really crazy, really horrible nights, where food was just not coming out the way it was supposed to, and I was not acting the way I was supposed to, or saying the thing, this sort of Christian missionaries was put in my back pocket, and this Gordon Ramsay guy comes back out, all this kind of stuff that I remember from that. But I think it was all an education and a learning process, and I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to have been brought in to work on that brand and then let everything evolve from that. So that's why it's so special. It's not just because it's got meatloaf or fried chicken.
Yeah.
It means more to me.
Yeah. And it's so cool to come into something with new, fresh eyes, and you don't know exactly the roadmap, is your first concept. I know for me, like just going into it, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how to run a business, and I made a lot of mistakes, but through those mistakes, those were the times, like those were defining moments, and so, and at the time seemed like, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing that I did that, or it was so awful. But now we kind of look back and can laugh or be like, oh my gosh, we can never let that happen again.
Yeah, for sure. We all learn from our mistakes. So.
Exactly. So let me ask you, we always have a confession. So what's your confession for this episode?
So last episode, my confession was about Legos, which is a little lighthearted. I think you made me think about this one, but I think for me it's a confession where some people closer to me in my network kind of know, and I speak about how important it was to me. But I think going through counseling for me is a confession of the sorts where it's not something that's secret. It's something that I'm really proud of. I don't go on Facebook and like take a selfie with my counselor, or anything like that. But
don't record the session.
So luckily I haven't been in a while. I think we worked through a lot of different things, but COVID wasn't the reason that I started going to counseling. I had been through marriage counseling, sort of. We've all kind of been through premarital, certainly, as I was trying to figure out who this husband and father was supposed to be. My wife and I, my current wife was, went to counseling, and it was like, it definitely helped. Like it made a huge difference. And it helped us, kind of work through things and reprioritize things. But of course, at the end of the day, I still was like, well, I got to go to work, and so it really came back to me. And what can I do as this husband and this father and this business owner? Like, what can I do to better myself? And COVID, again, it wasn't related to COVID, but COVID, stopped all the work. So made me kind of like now be present with my wife and my kids. And now all of a sudden it was like, oh, I didn't realize how, like, I wasn't really in tune. Like, typical guy or typical anybody that would be like, what are you talking about? I don't pay attention to you. Of course I pay attention to you. You get me from like 7:15 to like 7:45. Like what do you need? Like what's the problem? Like I give you a hug like once a day. Like I call you and tell you I love you. Like what's the big deal? And just like oblivious, right? And what I found, what ended up starting off with counseling via Zoom, right? Because it really was kind of for me, everything was urgent. Right? Everything's urgent, right? But it really was urgent. And it was the point where my wife and I were sort of debating, what's the next steps, right? Like what needs to change, or something really big is going to change, and what's that going to look like? And it was my goal in life. This is not going to end up like my first marriage. Like this has to work. And so I just put in the time, and so at that point, is this amazing counselor in Argyle, and I live in Argyle area, Lantana. And so it was easy to get to. Zoom at first, and then eventually as time went on, of course we met in person, whatever. I think we were like, maybe had a mask on or something. She's like, I'm so done with this, but what I learned is things like, setting my boundaries. That I mentioned that, setting the contracts up to where I had boundaries. So learning what my boundaries are for myself, like don't let these other things come in, because what's my center focus, right? Learning a lot about my parts and myself. And so when you go through counseling, they talk a lot about like, how do you feel? Like what part of you is kind of struggling, or what part of you is kind of hurting? And then they you sort of dissect that as to why it might be your chest, your heart, or your head, or whatever it might be. And then so we talked a lot about that. And what it came to realize is all this work I was doing was all this 80 hours a week and all this emailing at 2 a.m. and all this drive was all to avoid the reality that was at home. And so if I could just come to terms with the reality at home and understand that, God needs to be the center first. And if I can put him first, then the other things will start to take shape. And so that was like a big epiphany moment for me that took months, right, to get to. I did a lot of this stuff called EMDR, which is where they click things left and right and you go through this stuff in your brain. It's kind of hard to explain. But there's lights in front of you sometimes. And so it forces you to kind of think back to like, where was the catalyst? Like I talked about the ranch, like a positive experience for me. When is like some of the negative experiences from your childhood, and like track it all the way back to being like 15 years old. Right. And like, and all that, and like how I was raised and how I like lived my life and how I took off to college, like the day after I graduated from high school. Like that wasn't because I was a go-getter. That's because I wanted out. Right. And so, and then realizing, oh, wait a second. So I worked all the time. My first wife was, whoop, she's gone. And now I'm working all the time. My second wife's like, hey, hello, this can't happen again. And then here I go and start a business that I think is going to make me more calm, and I run off all the time. Right. And so anyway, but that's sort of the bigger confession, is that I think counseling, if you have the means, everybody has the time to spend an hour a week, or whatever it might be, to do some of that self-reflecting, that self-help. It was a Christian counselor. So like a lot of how we came at things, or how she came at things, weren't just sort of practical. They were real spiritual in sense. And being able to learn to this day now, now that I've sort of I haven't figured anything out, life is still a mystery, but I'm in this moment where I have learned through counseling, through prayer, through life, through mistakes, through, whatever it might be, that God is first. And if God's not first, then things start to kind of shake a little bit. And so if I can wake up every morning and say, you know what, you're the one, you're going to provide for me today. Maybe I get hit by a car tomorrow. You know what? And that's fine. Like that, he's going to provide then for the children. He's going to provide, like something horrible may happen to someone that I love, that God's going to provide my way out of that. Right. So like, if I have that, and I know that he's going to provide enough, whatever enough might be $5 for today. It might be $5,000 for today. So it might be an hour to myself. It might be an hour with my wife. It might be time to pick up my kids. It might be time to spend time with you, like doing this podcast. So it's like, there's just like enough. Like I just kind of live in that every day. So just provide enough for today. Like that's enough. And I'll get by the next day. And I'm not struggling every day, or anything like that. It's just, I always revert back to like, okay, the counseling got me out of this. Like, don't go backwards. Don't be the person you were. Don't be wrapped up into a chef coat identifies me. Be wrapped up into God identifies me. My family is the focus. Right. And then the work will just come. Right. And if it doesn't come, then God didn't intend for it to come. And he must have something else for me to do, whether that's spend some time alone building a Lego or spend some time with my kids and being at their sports practices or whatever. If a client wants me to travel and it doesn't work out for me, then I don't travel. And that's a deal breaker for me, because my kid has a baseball game or a football game. Like, sorry, I'm not going to travel. Like, I don't know what to tell you, and so that all those things have kind of come to realization through counseling. And then that's sort of the post. So I look at counseling. This is kind of a funny analogy, but like counseling, training a dog, and, creating or being a consultant are very similar. right? And I only know that about the dogs. We had our dog trainer come, and she told us all these things to do, and then left us and said, "Good luck. Like, you're the hands and feet. You got to do it." And that's how consulting is. I'm going to come in. I'm going to give you all the plays. I'm going to write it. I'm going to get you to the 5-yard line, but you have to execute the plan.
Right.
And that's what she did. And I think counseling is the same. Hey, here's all the things you should be doing. Here's all the things you should be reading. But ultimately, your counselor's not there holding your hand,
right,
patting you on the back every 5 minutes. Like, you got to get out into the
you got to
world.
take that next step.
Yeah. And so I've now been able to take the step, the journey, and it's been unbelievable.
Has it been freeing?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
That's
yes.
incredible.
Yes. And still locked into the industry, or not locked in, but like connected with the industry, connected with my peers, and realizing that all those hours, all that time, though it got me to where I needed to be. And I'm glad that I did it. No regrets there, that I can now impart that on other people to go, hey, you probably don't need to do that many hours. You probably don't need to be there. You need to help work with the people that you have around you and raise them up. So you don't have to be there all the time. So I've kind of readjusted the thinking, so.
Wow.
I know it's a lot to unpack.
No, that's
bigger than just Legos, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big believer in counseling too. And just, figuring out, like, I had that epiphany during 2020. Like, my identity is not wrapped up or it was wrapped up in W3. And, the people that work for me, the pressure and all of that, like, that, I can't make that all happen. God, God made it happen. It didn't make sense, but, he has provided me, he gives me what I need every day. Like you said, just enough. So, I think that our industry is just filled with, because it's all about performance.
Yeah.
And we talked about it in the last episode, but if I can encourage you, and just listening to John, he's so encouraging. Is like, we're not defined by our worst moment, and all it takes is one day, just like, I'm going to change things. You don't have to let that define you. You can make the changes, but using resources out there that's available, like counseling and, having good mentors to talk to, people like, have someone like a John Franke in your life that values family and what's important and what you value, like that is that can go a long way. I know I have mentors and it's been amazing. But thank you so much for joining us today. Like, John, like, you are such an inspiration and I could just talk to you forever. And I'm definitely going to try to convince you and bring more orange starburst. So he'll come back and agree to talk with us again, because I think there's so much more to dig into. But if you are a concept looking for, some direction, or you either existing or new, check this guy out. He's inspirational. Reach out to him. Also, if you like this podcast, please subscribe. We've got lots more inspiration coming. And again, this is all about just inspiring people in our industry and confessing in all of our confessions. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Have a good one. See you next time.
For more inspiration, follow our social media at W3 Sales. Please like, comment, and subscribe. All the things. We would love to connect with you.